It's great to see everybody. My name is Howard Hagee. I'm the president and CEO at the Mariners Museum and Park. And how fitting is it that on the night before we reopen to give our members a preview tomorrow on Friday, May 21st, that we're hearing from Leslie and the personality behind Museum Access. You all know that the mission of the Mariners Museum and Park is to connect people to the world's waters, because through the waters, through our shared maritime heritage, we're connected to one another. And we finally get to do that back in the galleries again. And we can't wait to show you a number of the upgrades, not only in our exhibit, but especially up in our conservation area, the Batten Conservation Complex. Our clean lab has been completely renovated to allow for visitors to come up and really see our conservators at work. And I got to tell you, it's something you don't always expect and anticipate seeing at a museum, but we're really proud of the space, and we think it's going to be a fantastic way for people to engage. We're also really excited that while we're still emerging from the pandemic and we're still being careful with distance and things that we touch and whatnot, we've created a really fun activity, a scavenger hunt for kids. And so we hope all of you that are nearby come rushing out to the museum. And for all of you that have got to plan a visit, just know the doors are open. And we'll open to the general public on May 28th. So it's going to be members and supporters from tomorrow through the 27th. And then May 28th, the doors are open for anybody. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Julie Murphy, and just really excited to see everybody in our gallery starting tomorrow.
And thank you all for joining us tonight. Like Howard said, we are so excited. The energy is just pulsating around the Mariners Museum. And for those of you near and far that are joining us tonight, we thank you. I do manage the lecture series here at the Mariners Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome everyone and to thank the Tom and Ann Honeycutt Fund for its support of the evening lecture series. This program tonight will close out our series until the fall. We will continue to offer virtual programs, so fear not if you live far away. We will be able to reach you as well with our lectures. I discovered tonight's speaker way pre-pandemic. More than a year ago now, I was channel surfing public television's myriad of TV offerings, and I landed on this program about motorcycles. Well, I'm a motorcycle aficionado, not driving them, but riding them. And there was this lovely lady just walking through these galleries of these awesome Harley Davidsons that were like, I cannot believe this place. What is it? And she got to interview this guy talking about all these bikes. And I realized there's a museum for Harley Davidson. So I watched the whole program because I was amazed. Not only did I decide I wanted this woman's job, but I also started following her series. And the more I watched, the more I said, we've got to get her to do a program. So Leslie Mueller, the host and executive producer of Museum Access, and I began about a 9 to 10 month chat trying to figure out when she might be able to deliver a lecture for us here at the museum. And so here we are tonight on the eve of our reopening, which is so exciting. Leslie shares everything about museums from the front door all the way through the back parts that people don't normally get to see. And working in a museum, I'm still as fascinated as anyone when I get to go on a behind the scenes tour at my own museum. But tonight, Leslie's going to take us on some tours of some of the top museums in America, where even though I've seen most of these museums from the outside or as a viewer, a visitor, I certainly haven't seen what she can share. She's so adept at talking to anyone from an astronaut to an archaeologist to an artisan, and she sees everything with the well-trained eye of the artist that she is. She's a native of the Chicago area and is now based out of Greenwich, Connecticut. She is devoted to inspiring and educating young people about the value of museums, and she showcases America's diverse cultural heritage and human achievement in every episode of Museum Access. So without my talking anymore, let's hear from Leslie Mueller. of Museum Access. And thank you all for being here with us.
Thanks so much, Julie. It's such an honor to be here. As executive director and host of Museum Access, I think it goes without saying that I love museums. I love them. I'm a basically curious person, and I'm sure a lot of you are too. You wouldn't have signed up for this unless you were curious. I really believe that visits to museums are adventures, and I've seen a lot of great museums. I think we all agree that museums are important, but have you ever thought why? They hold our cultural treasures and our history within their walls. Here's just a few of the museums that we visited. You may recognize some of them. The collections that they have include mammals and dinosaurs. They include the very beginnings of religion and the beginning of America, early locomotive transportation and early aviation, opportunities to learn about different cultures and exposing us to new ways of seeing things. From artifacts made of solid gold to folk art made of clay. These collections help us better understand our world. They are places where families can learn together. And boy, when I see a family in a museum, it really just warms my heart. Kids can expand their minds with interactive exhibits. They can step into different worlds and imagine what it would be like to be there. It doesn't matter what age you are or what your interests are. There's a museum out there for everyone. With priceless collections, there's important research being done every day in museums around the country. When we lose a museum, like Brazil's National Museum in Rio de Janeiro in 2018, we lose the history and culture of an entire country. We all watched in horror in 2019 as Notre Dame in Paris was in flames. Although some important art and religious relics were saved, many were destroyed. I think after these two horrific losses, we all have better understanding of just how important these national treasures we call museums are to our cultures. At age 13, I was really curious about the art world. Thankfully, my parents signed me up for classes at the Art Institute of Chicago. I spent every summer through high school heading down to the city, drawing and painting in the classrooms, on the lakefront, and even in the galleries. Those experiences changed my life direction, and they planted a seed that quietly grew for years. As an adult, I've been fortunate enough to visit museums from Tokyo to Morocco. And each time I leave knowing more about an exciting new culture, I begin to understand more clearly how museums can impact all of us and bring the world closer together. I decided it was time for a television series to focus on America's great museums. So let me show you some of the adventures we've had already in season 1 and season 2. There are over 35,000 museums within the United States, welcoming over 850 million visitors each year. Did you ever wonder what goes on behind the scenes in museums, creating the displays and exhibits we all enjoy? Join us as we explore museums from the inside out on each episode of Museum Access. So now that you've got a taste of our series, I'd like to share some behind-the-scenes stories with you. This was one of the first shoots that we did, and about 2 minutes after this picture was taken, a ladybug blew into my throat and down my throat, actually. So after gagging for about 10 minutes, we were able to start the shoot. This gentleman, I'm sure, was wondering why I was standing so close to him at the Adler Planetarium for the entire time. What had happened prior to meeting him a few minutes earlier I jumped into the bathroom thinking I've got a last minute chance to get in here before we actually start shooting. And of course, I dropped my microphone into the toilet. You don't want to know what I was saying at that point, but the videographer heard a lot of it. And I was in the bathroom trying to shake the water out of it. Clearly the microphone was dead, and I got to use the other guy's mic, but didn't want to tell him. So I was standing much closer than would be socially distancing right now. At that same shoot, they have a replica of NASA. Jim Lovell was featured in an incredible sculpture there, and I knew that he lived outside of Chicago in Lake Forest, Illinois. So I started stalking him and trying to figure out a way to interview him for part of this episode. Luckily, a good friend of mine knew his son, who had a restaurant in Lake Forest, and yada, yada, yada. About 9 months later, I was able to go to Lake Forest and meet Jim Lovell, and it was the most incredible conversation I've ever had. A humble man, considering all that he has done, and maneuvering Apollo 13 to get back to Earth. I also had the opportunity to go to the private museum within the CIA headquarters. It was an incredible experience, and it took probably about 9 months of pre-production work to go through all the channels to do this. I know that I was surprised that I shouldn't have been surprised that the telephones were not allowed in, but every piece of equipment, everything in my purse, everything that came in, the videographer's equipment needed to have verification, and everything had to be factory sealed. So it was quite a while to actually get into the agency to start our shooting, but it was absolutely worth all the clearance that we had to go through to do it. Tony Healy, who was the director at the time, she was retiring shortly afterwards, gave us an insider's view of one of the models at the Bin Laden's compound. One was at an undisclosed location, one was at the museum, and one was at the White House. It was the same model that President Obama saw to understand how the SEAL team was going to go in and actually try to get to bin Laden. And we all know the story from that. As many movies as I've seen about it, though, it was so much clearer seeing this model and understanding how that was, how that whole operation took place. It was fascinating. Also, I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you can see on the lower left, I'm not sure how clear it is. Anytime there were pictures in the museum of any of the officers, everybody's faces were blurred out. But it's a great museum, and anybody that starts working at the CIA has to go through it. And so they learn about the history of the agency. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City was one of the first museums that we had the opportunity to shoot. It was very interesting because Dan Weiss was in a temporary position there at the time, and he was going to be the person who was going to be talking to me and doing the overview of the museum. My telephone was ringing just as he came down, surrounded by a group of people out of a secret elevator I'd never even seen off the mezzanine at the Met. And he walked over and was very, very nice. And, I'm thinking, I can't believe my phone is ringing. And I turned the phone off quickly, and we started the interview. And after we finished everything, we were walking to another area, and he had left. And I checked my phone, and it was my husband that had called me to tell me, "Are you still talking to Dan? He was just designated the new president of the museum. He probably won't have time to talk with you today." So I always am very thankful that he was willing to take an hour out of his time when I'm sure there were more important people that wanted to talk with him that particular day. He also told me something very interesting. I asked him about how he got interested in the art world. And he said, to be perfectly honest with you, I was going to college, and there was a really attractive gal that was taking an art history class. And I kind of thought if I took that art history class, I might meet her. And darn if he didn't. And I asked him how that went. And he goes, "Well, I've been married over 30 years. So that worked out okay for him." But I have to say, one of the most interesting experiences I've had was the Collings Foundation has a living history of aviation museum. It has World War II aircraft. And this was special to me on a personal level. My father flew B-17 bombers out of England for 33 missions during World War II. So I was almost giddy when we had a chance to go into it and kind of see where the pilot and co-pilot sat. And even more importantly, had the opportunity to take the flight. That was over Long Island Sound. And I think I was actually squealing at that point because I didn't realize that was on my bucket list, but boy, was that ever fun. Unfortunately, a year later, that exact aircraft crashed at Bradley Airport in Connecticut. And all I could think of was, my God, we were there a year before, how exciting it was to be able to be on the flight, but accidents happen. And I was just lucky we got some of the last footage on that actual B-17 before it crashed. This was a very special situation. The Terracotta Warriors are a really interesting group of artifacts. The figures are actually a collection of sculptures that the armies, that depicted the armies of the first emperor of China. If you go to China, to Tianjin, this is what you would see. And on the right, you can see a mezzanine where people are standing. So you're really quite far away from the figures, but it is breathtaking to see that many of them. There were thousands and thousands, and they haven't even uncovered all the fields yet. They've done one or two. I had a feeling at that point that I knew that the museum, it had taken 7 years of conversations with the People's Republic of China for them to get as many pieces as they were going to have at this exhibition at the Field Museum. So I knew there was a lot of diplomacy involved, and I was frankly concerned about where the US relationship was going with China, and this was several years ago. And I thought, you know, I think we should probably shoot this. This is going to be very special. So what we did was we went there, we shot it. I mean, there were carriages like this, there were so many pieces. And it was interesting hearing how there were representatives from the People's Republic of China that traveled with the artifacts, checked everything as they came out of the crates with magnifying glasses, and then checked everything before it was crated up and escorted it back to the People's Republic of China. Nobody would have the opportunity, except for in this kind of situation where you could reach your hand out, you know, you're not supposed to touch them, but you are that close to these artifacts. You wouldn't even see it if you went to China. So that was really, really interesting. Now, I have to say that the Harley-Davidson Museum was so interesting, and I know Julie was talking about it. Remember I said that there is a museum for everyone? Well, there really is. And here you go. It's a Harley-Davidson museum in Milwaukee. I had the chance to talk with Bill Davidson, and it was fascinating. His grandfather was the one that helped put the motor on this bicycle, and that was the beginning of all of it. So fast forward, several years ago, my mother had passed away. Plans were being made for her to rest in peace next to my father at the Arlington National Cemetery. And I was going through some of her papers. And I opened up a yellow piece of paper that had a big ornate Harley-Davidson logo across the top. And I thought, what the heck is this? And when I read it, I realized that her father, after World War I, had gone to work at the Harley-Davidson factory in Milwaukee, which is where she was from. None of my sisters knew that. None of us knew that. So we were kind of fascinated by that. Later, they took me into the archival area, and you can see the three racks high of every motorcycle that was ever made by the Harley-Davidson company. They started taking one off the assembly line from year one, and they had hundreds of them. So that's part of the decision that they made to create this museum. So about halfway, you know, we were about halfway through the shoot, and Bill Davidson says, come on, I want to show you something. And they moved the big racks and they walked me back there and they said, look at that top rack there. Your grandfather's hands were on every one of those motorcycles there because those were the years that he was working there. So who would have ever thunk, you know, that that would be something that I'd learn so many years later? When COVID-19 virus reared its ugly head, things changed for museums big time. They had to close and rethink the museum experience. They had to answer the tough question, how can folks continue to enjoy their beloved museums, but from a distance? All over the country, museum staffers got to work. The conservation areas of many museums donated countless masks and gloves to the local hospitals, and many museums extended membership expiration dates. Some museums already had extensive digital libraries in their collections, but for others, it was a wake-up call. They had to start working on that full speed. And as the front doors closed, they began to come up with ways to open their virtual doors. And boy, did they get that. They got so creative. New exhibits that you could see online, concerts, story hours, summer camp, curators' cuts, tours, classes, and a lot more. The Mariners Museum created a variety of great ways for folks to continue to interact with the museum here. And there are many, many more ways that they were doing it all along. Museums have used this pandemic as an opportunity to think outside the box. And thankfully, many, if not most, will continue these innovative online programs long after they reopen full time. The good news is museums are reopening at last. You can feel completely safe visiting your museums once again. I took this video a few weeks ago at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Looks pretty normal, right? Yes, there are familiar signs that we have all gotten used to. Museums are disinfecting and cleaning according to CDC standards. It was such fun seeing couples and families and friends enjoying the museum together. There were plenty of visitors of all ages that brought their drawing pads with them too. Boy, did that remind me of the days at the Art Institute. Whether they were visiting a favorite painting once again, taking pics of friends, or taking a quick snooze, everybody was enjoying being back at their beloved museum, including me. Yep, some things have changed, but a lot has stayed the same. As I've already mentioned, check the museum website for up-to-date information. Here's a quick peek at what's airing now on season 3.
Join us as we explore museums and their exhibits from the inside out. Today we're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History. It's affiliated with the Smithsonian and serves as America's resource for nuclear science and history.
Basically, you have 24 frames a second, and each drawing is changed just a little bit. And then when those are all projected continuously, photographed, each one individually, and then projected, it gives the illusion of movement.
When I began this museum access journey, I knew that we'd be able to create a program that was fun and entertaining, but I never realized that we would tap into something much bigger, the human desire to learn. Museums are the gatekeepers of history, but unfortunately, not everybody has the opportunity to visit our country's great museums. Our series takes these wonderful museums to them. We make the museum experience accessible to everyone through public television. During the pandemic, we took a deeper dive into education by creating activity sheets, discussion sheets, classroom lesson plans, and we even developed a museum access coloring book that's great for all ages. Everything's on our website, and we're very proud that the U.S. Department of Education helps fund our closed captioning and video descriptions so deaf and hearing impaired and blind and sight impaired children and adults can enjoy our series too. We are also now part of the Discovery Education Online platform. We still have many more museums to explore across America, so stay tuned as we begin production for season 4. I'd like to thank the Mariners Museum for allowing me to share a little museum access journey with you today, and thank you for tuning in. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Julie.
That was fabulous. We do have some comments and questions here. Bridget asked, with so many different museums and subject matter, how do you prepare for your interviews? Do you find that the conversations become spontaneous?
You know, they really do, Bridget. I mean, I study, I'm cramming like I'm cramming for an exam before I go so that I know a lot about it. But I want to go into the museum as if I don't know anything about it. I'm talking to the experts. They're the experts. And I explain that before we start our conversations. And that's why I don't really call them interviews, because we end up kind of just talking back and forth. They're more comfortable, I'm more comfortable, and I think we have a more genuine conversation.
And I wanted to comment on your personal connection that you found. That's a big thing for us at the Mariners Museum, is finding our connection to one another through the world's waterways, because through the water, we're all connected. And so when you shared your personal connection, that's something we're very big on here at the Mariners Museum, where we explore how we are all mariners at heart through the water. So I appreciated your personal connection. I also wanted to comment on the value of volunteers. We could not do what we do at the Mariners Museum without an incredible posse of volunteers.
I had no idea, Julie, you're right.
Oh, it's just amazing. And so many of them are behind the scenes doing very detailed work that they've been professionally trained for, obviously engineers and architects and all kinds of people that do give of their time and talent here at the Mariners, and we couldn't do what we do without them, for sure.
God bless them. Mm-hmm.
And I do want to remind people that if you can't catch Leslie on public broadcasting or PBS, Amazon Prime Video, you can get all the seasons of her show. And you're now shooting season 4, did you say?
Yeah, we have a few of them under our belt already, which I think people will be thrilled. We're shaping up to be a nice season. That was during first quarter in 2022.
Well, spring in Virginia 2022, you need to come see us. We will show you what we've got behind the scenes, and I know you would share with the world what we do have in our museum. So I really appreciate it. Lots of people are thanking you for the option of armchair travel to museums that they might not have been to yet. So we look forward to your future stories of that. And I do laud you for your education efforts during this pandemic. We have increased our education offerings a great deal and continue to reach children and young people. That's part of our mission as well. So we thank you for sharing your website and your materials. I enjoy your newsletter. I encourage anyone to go. Your website tell the address of your website, Leslie.
Yeah, www.museumaccess.com.
Right. And so she's happy to share her resources, and they're
Sure.
wonderful.